Hey guys, what's happening? And welcome to the Action Channel. So today I have a very interesting video for you. What would happen if we took a legend of the past and put him up against a warrior of today? Better yet, what if they happen to be father and son? Let's check it out. Alright guys, welcome to the action department. So let me start this video by asking you a question. Do you know this guy? Bolo Yeung, also known as Chong Li from Bloodsport. There's no doubt that 99% of you guys watching know this fella and his huge pectoral muscles and his mean look. However, let me ask you another question. Did you know that this guy actually has a son and he's jacked as hell? That's right, the man's name is David Yeung and he's also known as Bolo Jr. Now before David starts kicking some butt in this video, let's go back to the beginning, to 1974 when the man was born, which was just 1 year after his father Bolo Yeung appeared in the famous movie Enter the Dragon. That is one of the greatest martial arts films of all times. Now what's really interesting here is that young David grew up and became very much like his father in many ways. Among their interests were martial arts, bodybuilding, and of course appearing as tough guys in action films. Now before we start breaking some skulls in this video, why don't we warm up by breaking a few bricks and also smash that like and subscribe button. Alright, so before we start comparing father versus son, old lion versus young lion, teacher versus student, let's start by taking a look at Bolo Yeung's background. Bolo Yeung was born in 1946, which means he was about 28 years old when young David came along. At the age of 10, he got involved with martial arts and trained under several kung fu masters. Growing up, he also took a serious interest in bodybuilding and later on became Mr. Hong Kong, in which he actually held the title for 10 years. And on top of that, he was also crowned as Mr. Asia in 1975. His impressive physique was his ticket to the world of action movies. And just a few years later, Bruce Lee himself actually discovered this man and put him in the movie Enter the Dragon as one of the main bad guys. Over the next 10-12 years, Bolo Yeung worked in the movie industry mostly as a bad guy. I mean, you can't blame them for casting him that way, right? To be honest, I have to say most of the movies he did during this time was a little and you probably have to be a crazy super freak fan to really appreciate them. Now that being said, one of the movies was the low-budget movie Legacy of Rage, where he played opposite Brandon Lee. Now Bolo just played a thug in the film, so it wasn't that memorable, but it was pretty funny though that he appeared in two films, one with Bruce Lee and one with his son Brandon Lee, in which Brandon kicked his butt. And of course, it goes without saying that he played an unsympathetic idiot in both films. So when Bolo appeared opposite Brandon Lee, he certainly wasn't a big star yet. However, in 1986, that all changed when he was cast as the main bad guy, Chong Li, in the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie Bloodsport. The two of them hit it off and became good friends, and just a few years later, in 1991, he also appeared as the bad guy in the movie Double Impact, also with Van Damme. What a great villain he was. And as you can see, in this film, Jean-Claude definitely had his hands full, just like in Bloodsport. The man is definitely best known as a bad guy throughout most of his career. However, in the early 90s, things changed a little bit when he played several heroic roles in Hollywood. And now, let's check out David Yeung, also known as Bolo Jr. By the way, I should probably mention for some of you guys that don't know, Bolo Yeung's real name is actually not Bolo, but he simply adopted it after the movie Enter the Dragon, in which the name of his character was Bolo. Remember what good old Han said? Bolo. Exactly. So the big question here, how did David Yeung get involved with bodybuilding? You would imagine it had something to do with his famous father, right? And all the man's accomplishments. Well, that might have contributed, but reality is, the young boy walked into a gym when he was just 12 years old and asked, "Who's the greatest bodybuilder in the world?" At the time, Lee Haney held the title as Mr. Olympia. I believe he was 4-time Mr. Olympia at the time. He ended up winning 8 trophies total. Young David looked at the poster and said to himself, "Someday I will look like that too." Now even before that, he had already gotten involved with martial arts, probably thanks to his dad, and he began studying at 3-4 years of age. Father Bolo taught him mostly Tai Chi in the beginning, since he was an expert in that. Later on, David started studying in a school, everything from Wing Chun to karate and taekwondo. After arriving in Los Angeles, he also got involved with both boxing and kickboxing. So altogether, the man is pretty all-rounded in the fighting department. So what about the whole bodybuilding thing? Most people, of course, get involved just to improve themselves, try to look good, and just to feel good about themselves. However, David managed to take it to a whole nother level, and in the 90s he ended up competing in a ton of shows, and his very last show was in 2003. So he had at least a 10-12 year run on the competitive stage. David stands at 5'8", which is 1 inch taller than his famous dad. A lot of people actually, including myself, was pretty surprised that Bolo Yeung isn't taller. However, of course, on the big screen, everybody can look like a giant. Of course, I still wouldn't mess with him, otherwise he may say something to me.
You are next.
Alright, so now we have met the notorious and beloved Bolo Yeung. Let's check out his son, David Yeung, aka Bolo Jr. Now, David Yeung has worked really hard. He certainly has made it just because of his last name alone, I can tell you that. It's kind of like at the gym. You can't fake it. Either you can lift the weights or you can't. And that leads us to the man's competitive days as a bodybuilder. Alright, now let's take a look at some pictures from his competitive days. You can tell he definitely has all the right genetics. And look at all the striations in his body. It's absolutely amazing, and you can see why he belongs on the bodybuilding stage. Here you see the man's body transformation throughout the years. He has definitely come a long way. In this picture you see him training with Daddy, that obviously is extremely knowledgeable in the area. I assume this picture is when he was in his prime. Look at the size of those shoulders and arms, it's absolutely amazing. Now, as you can see, he was completely ripped on the bodybuilding stage. I don't know how much he weighed at the time, but I know that today he only weighs around 155 pounds, 160. But back then, it was a whole different story. Okay, so what happened here? Apparently he retired in 2003, and at the time he wasn't even 30 years of age. Nowadays it's not unusual for bodybuilders to be competing while they're in their 40s, especially since the body does not experience full muscle maturity until your late 30s. He ended up with both a back and a knee injury, which meant that he more or less had to retire, or he decided to do so, and realized that it wasn't worth it to continue doing it. Living the bodybuilding lifestyle can be extremely tough on the body, the drugs and everything that comes with it. So sometimes it's good to quit while you're ahead. Okay, and now to the big question of the video that you have all been waiting for. Between father and son, who's the man? Honestly, I think they're both the man. At least, I hope so, for the sake of their wives at least. Of course, most people will say, well, Bolo Yeung, he won more bodybuilding titles and he made it much further in the movie, so of course he takes the cake. Well, I don't know if it's that simple, because there's many ways of looking at it. And of course, it's not really fair to compare, because these two guys grew up in two completely different eras. I would say Bolo Yeung definitely had more size, and he was very well known for that. However, David Yeung here, if you look at him, look at his body, it's absolutely amazing put together. The definitions, the proportions, pretty much everything goes hand in hand if you ask me. They're also both into martial arts, they can definitely move, and they have great screen presence. So I think we have to leave it at a tie. Now guys, I want you to comment and say what you think. But I also have to admit that a lot of people are very biased, so I'm guessing that they'll go with Bolo Yeung. But hey, this is just how I look at it. Now, Bolo, of course, is a true legend, and the man has worked over 50 years in a business where he has also worked with the best. So that's pretty tough to beat. That being said, most people know that Van Damme was the first action guy in the movies that combined both bodybuilding with martial arts skills. However, I beg to differ. Bloodsport didn't come out until 1988, and by then, Bolo had already been in the game for many years. Enter the Dragon came out 15 years earlier, and I would actually go as far as to say that Bolo was the first guy to combine both physical superiority with martial arts, and present it on the big screen. Of course, Van Damme was the first man in America or in Hollywood, so that's why he gets all the credit. And most of Bolo's movies in the 70s never even came out in the West, so that might explain a thing or two. Okay, fast forward a couple of decades. What's the man up to today? Well, training is definitely part of his everyday life, and one of his many jobs is to be a trainer for MMA athletes. So what about the world of action movies? I did mention that earlier, right? Well, even though he hasn't achieved the same heights in the world of action like his father has, David has still left his mark on the genre. When he was just 14 years old, he appeared in Alex Law's Painted Faces, the story about Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, and their fellow Chinese opera students. At the time of this video, he has a total of 5 films either in pre or post productions, including the movie The Last Kumite. The Last Kumite is a throwback to some of the popular martial arts movies from the 1980s like Bloodsport and Kickboxer. Another movie that he has worked on recently is the movie The Circuit 4. So altogether, the man has been pretty busy in the action department recently. So it looks like David is following in his father's footsteps, which is a pretty cool thing. Anyway guys, I thought David Yeung seems like a very interesting guy, and with his background and all his accomplishments, he definitely belongs on this channel. And also, keep an eye out for this guy. This isn't the last you've seen of him. Alright guys, thanks for checking out the Action channel. Now speaking of action, why don't you take and smash that like and subscribe button. I'll see you next time for some more crazy and insane action. Have a good day now.